Hi, everyone. Very excited to see those who are going to be joining us for today's webinar. We're going to hold off on starting for just a moment while we give everyone a chance to log in. So for the next couple of minutes, find a cozy spot, grab a coffee or a water, and we'll go ahead and get started in a few minutes. If you are joining, feel free to jump into the chat and let us know where you're joining from. And it also looks like for anyone who is joining, we do have a poll question that you can also find in the chat. So if you click on the button on the right bottom right of your screen, the poll question today is, what areas of the digital workplace is your organization prioritizing in 2025? We've got a few options there. So if you are inclined, feel free to vote. All right, looks like our panelists are weighing in. We've got a mixed bag today. I think this is going to be a fun session. All different types of views. Love it. So we'll go ahead and get started in a minute or two, about 34 after. %of us are those saying streamlining tools, interfaces, and workflows. Definitely don't disagree with that. All right. I think now is a great time to go ahead and get started since we have all of our wonderful panelists are here already online. So thank you for joining. Now that we're a few minutes in, we can go ahead and dive right in. So welcome everyone to our event series, HR Game Changers. This is a multi-theme, multi-episode series, and today is our 4th episode. Really excited to be here. We are talking today about the digital workplace and trends and innovations for 2025. I think it's something that's on a lot of our minds as HR leaders and just students of the industry. It's a really exciting time to be working in our industry for sure. If you do have peers or colleagues that would like to join the series now or later, feel free to share the registration with them, the link, and I'll also drop that into the chat right now. And then as a side note, we will have a live Q&A at the end. So if you think of any questions during the webinar that you'd like to ask of the panelists, feel free to drop those in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and add the link here. Great for anyone who would like to join. All right, so let's get into it. So let's do some introductions. So first, my name is Janelle Henry. I'm really excited to be hosting my first episode of Game Changers today. And I've spent nearly 20 years working in recruiting and human resources through a wide variety of organizations, Expedia, Microsoft, and then most recently spent 13 years at Meta, formerly Facebook. And now I'm head of people at RadAI and a customer of GoProfiles, which is an AI employee engagement, recognition, and rewards platform. And before we get started in introducing the remainder of our panelists, I just want to thank the GoProfiles team and product. It's been a great effort for RadAI. It's improved our company culture, and we love it for our recognition purposes to celebrate and engage with each other. So let's get into who we have with us. So first, I would love to hand it over to Priti Patel, who is our Chief People Officer at G2. Priti, it would be wonderful if you could tell the audience a little bit about you, and I have 2 prompting questions for you. Since we're all in human resources and recruitment, I would love to hear for you to share with us, what was your first paying job? And then tell us a little bit about your most recent paying job at G2.
Absolutely. And Janelle, because feedback is a gift, I just want you to know your mic, I think, is hitting something and creating background noise.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to let you know. Hi, everyone. I'm Priti Patel, as Janelle mentioned, and I work at G2. And my first paying job was, I guess, technically my parents' business. So I am a first generation American. My parents immigrated from India about 60 years ago now, and they started a chain of donut businesses in the Milwaukee area.
Wow.
And my first job was at 12, waitressing at 4 a.m. Yep. And I say technically because I got paid in tips, but my parents
donuts. I would assume. Do you have an opinion on the best donut flavor?
Ooh, well, so the donut chain is called Honey Dip Donuts, and that was its namesake. So just the pure yeast glazed donut is perfection. Yes, nice. Especially fresh out of the fryer in the morning.
Amazing.
And my most current paying job is being Chief People Officer at G2. So those of you who don't know, G2 is the world's largest software marketplace. About 90 million people like us visit G2 every day to inform their software purchasing decisions. So we've got some software. All of us are from the software world. We also have profiles on G2. And so prospective buyers come to visit and understand how to inform their purchasing decision. And we service our customers with data that is powered by those visitors.
Amazing. Well, it's great to meet you, Priti. Thank you so much for your introduction. I'm going to hand it over next to Susan Elegan Jackson, who is Senior Head of Global People Ops at Pegasystems. Great to meet you. Same question for you, Susan, your first paying job and your most recent paying job.
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for having us, Janelle. So my story wasn't as great as Priti's. My first paying job was, those mall vendor fronts. I worked at a smoothie place, so I churned out smoothies all day.
Nice.
And, at my young age of, 14, 15, I was excited to have free smoothies on my 4-hour shift.
That is a draw, I'm sure. You were popular.
It absolutely was. And I got to roam the mall, and it was some good teenage years.
Great.
My current job is Global Head of People Service Delivery at Pegasystems, which for folks who don't know Pega, we are a software company based in Cambridge, Mass. And we really specialize in developing low-code platform for workflow automation and customer engagement. So you might have Pega at your current company and might not even know it, but that's kind of what we do here.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you on the panel today, Susan. And then last, we have Anthony Onesto, who is Chief People Officer at Suzy. So Anthony, you got a high bar here. We've got a yogurt shop, donuts. Is your first job food related? The people want to know.
It's a great. Well, thanks. Good to meet everyone and hear the stories. Unfortunately, it's not, but it was really important. I was delivering the news to people's homes. So I don't know if people get newspapers anymore, but I guess at that time, it could be now called a paper person, but I was a paper boy, I guess at that age. So yeah, I would ride a bike. By the way, Sunday newspapers, if you remember, were like this thick, and it was just like good exercise, but wow, a lot of papers. So yeah, that was my first paying job. And I learned collections strategies in that, because you'd go and try to collect and people would turn their lights down and not pay you. So they were doing military crawls, but, anyway, my current job is CPO, as you said, at Suzy. Suzy is a software platform for consumer insights and research. We've been around for a couple of years now, really working with enterprise customers. We actually are a client of G2, and so happy to connect the dots there. And we are fully remote, so we're in the United States, and we have employees in over 40 different states right now, and working through real strong growth. So really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, it's great to meet you. And since it sounds like I was having some audio challenges, I'll just repeat who I am again for anyone who may have joined while it was fuzzy. I am Janelle Henry. I am I am head of people at RadAI and have spent the last 20 years building out recruitment and HR functions at Expedia, Microsoft, and most recently Meta. And I'm really excited to be moderating the panel today. So let's get into it. Let's advance to our next slide. Wonderful. So I think for everyone on this panel, as HR leaders, we all know that HR plays a pivotal role in driving digital transformation to not only ensure that employees thrive, but organizations do as well. HR helps drive change management, and we are tasked with enhancing the employee experience in all capacities. And we also run talent acquisition management along with upskilling or reskilling employees. So I'd love to get the panel's thoughts on these. HR does play a pivotal role in driving transformations to ensure employees through the organizations thrive. Any of these resonate with you and your teams as you're looking to what you're really going to be focusing on ahead in 2025?
I'm happy to kind of lean in here and kick us off for now. I think, one of the things we're really focused on is how to shape our digital employee experience, and not only just enhancing it, but creating this enhanced personalization across our HR programs and processes to integrate things like AI and, just having an emphasis on employee well-being. And there are companies today who are leveraging these AI personalized experiences to really center learning based on employee skills and just career goals. So we're doing a lot of work around exploration of following the trends, figuring out how it's evolving and what we can prioritize across our own organizations. Even things like integrating feedback mechanisms in our talent cultivation processes. Those are some of the key things that we're looking at as we move into 2025 to figure out, how do we really enhance the employee experience?
That's great. And we actually had a comment on from one of our viewers who said HR leaders are busy, which I feel like is another TLDR way when we look at this list. Anyone else have any comments they'd like to add of where they might be prioritizing efforts in 2025?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in, and I love being busy, by the way. So good job security for all of us, hopefully as we move forward. But for us, it's really the incorporation and the integration of AI into everything that we're doing. I am obsessed with AI, and really have been a early adopter in terms of the different functionalities and capabilities. So when you look at these 6 different segments here that you have displayed, I can see AI having an impact, whether it's driving digital transformation. I think, the concept of driving digital transformation that's table stakes now, especially I wrote a book about Gen Z and how we really need to think about them from a talent perspective. They were born, I said this in a seminar once, they were born with an iPhone in their hands, and someone called me out. I was like, no, literally they're not born with iPhones in their hands. That's silly. But the idea of digital transformation, change management, we're always in metamorphosis these days. There's no longer these yearly changes or even quarterly, I think every week, especially in high growth companies like ours. So I can see, but I think AI, if we were to sort of create another slide here, it would be the underpinning of all of this, right? How is AI going to impact all of these things? So absolutely in each area, but really with a fundamental focus on AI.
Yeah, it's definitely a really fascinating time to be a part of this industry, right? Because it really is going to be a game changer, if you will, in terms of what AI is able to do to enhance, candidate employee experience and not necessarily replace it, which I think, we as lifelong people leaders know you can't replace it, right? There's nothing quite like the human element. So thank you for that answer, Anthony. So I'm going to continue to move us along to our discussion points today. So we have some questions that we have pre-planned. And at this point in time, again, also welcome any audience questions as we're going through these. But today we're going to talk about the latest trends in the digital employee experience. We will highlight the role of AI and automation in our HR processes. We will look at digital tools that boost employee engagement, well-being, and productivity. We'll talk through stages for maintaining engagement in hybrid and remote settings, which sounds like several of us, myself included, have lots of experience in. And last but certainly not least, we will share best practices for equipping employees with skills for the evolving digital workplace. So with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone's faces for the Q&A. There we go. Look at us. So let's jump into the first question. First question for the panel. What are the key trends shaping the digital employee experience in 2025 from each of your unique views? Feel free to jump in.
I can start. Yeah, this is an interesting one because I think, Anthony was just talking about AI, and I know there's questions about AI specifically. So maybe just to take more of a 50,000 foot view here. Context on G2, we're about 600 employees globally distributed, and about 40% of our workforce is remote. And so we are in this hybrid setup. And for those of you who follow the work of Brené Brown, one of the things she talks about when people come together is this idea of like emotional contagion. Like that is what the power of being in person is. And so we've been thinking a lot about like, how do we replicate that when 40% of our workforce is hybrid or remote? And really it comes down to three things. It comes down to authenticity in how we communicate expectations and what roles are, especially if people are onboarding. And to Anthony's point, Gen Z, early career onboarding for the first time remotely, and do it transparently. If we can do both authentic and transparent communication in big changes that we're doing, mandates or goals that we have, I think the collaboration then just comes naturally. One specific example is we're going through a lot of transformation as a company, changing how we're going to market, changing pricing and packaging, pretty much anything you can think of as far as a business goes. We're doing a lot of those changes at once. And the way that we've really been thinking about communicating those changes is being clear on where people can get that information. And it's always the same setup. What happened, why. And I know it sounds so simple to say that, but that consistency in how we've been communicating has paid off dividends because people find always, whenever we've rolled out a big change, hey, at least you communicated as early as possible, as clearly as possible, and thank you for that transparency. So looking ahead, that for us is a big thing.
If you don't mind, I'd love to ask a follow-up question to that. I know, having worked in the industry for quite some time, not everything used to be communicated so much online and Slack and messaging and this and Notions and this and that. And so do you ever think that we're over communicating too much or sort of changing the way that we're communicating? I would love to hear, since it sounds like your company is kind of experiencing some changes there.
Yeah, Anthony answered it for all of us. No, I don't think there is a such thing as over communicating because people will miss it.
Agreed.
However, one thing I will say is I've been in the role for 3 years now. First year, we spent about 6 to 9 months building our employer brand and how we really thought about the pillars of how we communicate, consistent kind of ethos and how we come back to that. Alongside that, it also defined, where do we put major news? Do we put it in Slack channels? Which channel? We also use a wiki, an internal wiki. And with that, what goes in the wiki? What goes in Slack? What goes in email, right? Those very detailed questions we've outlined very clearly. And when people get onboarded to G2, they learn that. So they know how to
Oh, that's great.
And yes, it's a little overwhelming at first, but they get the hang of it after they kind of learn the way it is here.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much more access I would say the average employee has now in this much more digital age to how leaders are making decisions with the progress of the company. Because I can remember in my first few jobs, you only really knew what was sort of directly in front of you, maybe what your manager was telling, and potentially what you'd learn at all hands. And now it seems everyone has access to so much more, which ideally is enhancing their job, enhancing their experience as an employee, and pushing the company forward. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to discuss about digital trends that they're seeing, Anthony or Susan?
I think I'd probably add, like, even when we think about in terms of the way that we're providing HR or people team support, it's a sticky wicket between how we manage automation and investment in things in AI and how we're balancing out our desire to scale with that human interaction that we know that our employees need as we navigate things like future of work. And, we've kind of dipped our toe in the AI space in terms of how that transcends to HR. And, we stood up things like a people buddy where, folks are able to go get that immediate communication or that immediate support, but then balancing out on the back end, especially for my own organization, is when is it appropriate and when do you find that balance to pick up the phone and just make sure someone can actually hear you and understand what, the messaging or support that you really need is. And so I think as we navigate into 2025, 2026, we're thinking about ways, how do we scale through all of this great process efficiency, but then how do we make sure that we're keeping and protecting our culture of that human touch and people team support that we know our workforce might need?
Yeah, that's a great call out. We're doing something similar at RadAI with our usage of Slack and kind of knowing when to call a timeout and when to take it off of Slack, right? And we've got some guidance there of when it's getting too heated, when the conversation is going on too long, when we're continuing adding people in there. And I think it's our job as leaders to also really try to preserve that in-person sort of face-to-face, get on the phone culture, especially for important topics. We had a nice call up from the audience. They love that naming convention. So thank you, Susan. Curious, as a follow-up to that, how have some of these trends evolved from previous years, and what should companies focus on moving forward?
I can jump in there and I double down on everything that everyone else said around these trends. I think for me, the interesting thing here is that for the first time in, I think, the history of companies, we really have our digital breadcrumbs. And because of remote, we're actually seeing how our organizations are actually running. We all had a thesis, especially when it was in person, how these things would get communicated. There was a time many, many, many years ago where you used to get a memo and have to sign for the memo. You've read it. It was in an envelope and it would get passed around. Where now all these digital capabilities that we have here are creating a ton of noise. And so for me, what I'm seeing is, and again, I talk a lot about AI, and I just want to be clear, I'm an optimist when it comes to AI. That thinking about how to best and when deliver those messages are going to be key, whether it is a digital message or an in-person message. So I think AI is going to actually, because of all these digital breadcrumbs, what I mean by digital breadcrumbs is all these activities, right? These notes that folks are saying, or when something is read, and obviously there are privacy and other concerns when you think about it. But if you have this pure view of how the organization actually communicates and works, our traditional hierarchical standards of how communication. So I just actually gave a training on this where typically you would go, executive leaders to managers to employees, right? That's kind of the cadence that we would follow around communications. But what if you found, and oftentimes what will happen here is if your leader is not communicating, then a whole slew of employees are missing messages. But what if we looked at AI and had it analyze that? Actually, that's the wrong way to think about it. In fact, there are influencers that are more powerful in your organization than your leaders. And what if you're delivering the messaging to them to then filter out? So I think the beauty of all this, and again, purely an optimist here, is that all of these, we're going to get such insights and also delivery. Axios did a really interesting research. If you're familiar with Axios, the news, they also have like an internal communication tool that they offer. And they looked at communication trends of when people actually read messages, and found that in the early morning, like literally like 5 a.m. is when most folks actually read things. I'm not one of those folks. I need my 8 hours of sleep, so I'm not reading anything that early, but it's just interesting. So I think when we think of digital trends, what is the data going to tell us to effectively communicate? And like Susan said, it could say, hey, digital communication sucks for this individual. Excuse my French, my New York French there, but actually in person is better. That's more effective. So I think we're going to really get to the point where we're going to be highly more effective in sending out messages in different ways than we normally have.
Yeah, I love that. And Anthony, I mean, you were a paper delivery person. You should have known messages love the morning time. You know, that was an easy one for you.
Yeah, collections not so much, but yeah, they love the newspaper.
So close. You actually bring me to, you kind of already touched on my next question, which is how are AI and automation impacting HR processes today? So would love to hear from Priti or Susan if you have any insights on, examples where automation has had the biggest impact on efficiency or potentially with employee satisfaction at your companies.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I've got probably 4 specific ones. And this is even just, you asked previously, like, what has the evolution been over the years? I would even say just in the time I've been at G2 in 3 years. 3 years ago, the first one I was going to talk about is our quarterly eNPS survey. We have pushed this very hard with our employees. And so we enjoy like 90% plus participation rate, which means thousands and thousands of comments. That used to take, I see some of my team on here that was here, that used to take us 2 weeks to process that data and read all the comments. We would codify where it should go and then create themes. Now that takes us hours. I mean, it is amazing. So using AI for that, TA, talent acquisition and sourcing, same kind of idea, this idea of sourcing through, sometimes we get 500 applicants for some of our roles. That used to take us 2-3 days to sift through, find who we needed. We're using an AI tool now that we can do that within 6 to 8 hours. The third one is compensation, which is, all of our favorite topic.
Absolutely.
My first merit cycle, we had all of these spreadsheets that had embedded VLOOKUPs from Google Sheets to Google Workbooks. And if anything changed or one leader changed a column, it all broke. You all remember those days. We now have software that does that so easily. You can set the pool. It is just such a slick process, and it's fed by also market data on comp. So it's just the innovation in 3 years has been incredible. I mentioned 4. The fourth one we're actually working on right now, which is using all of our internal wiki, which has so much information that we post, to seamlessly via AI answer employee questions that we would get via Slack. For us, this is huge because, it's, what do we say? It's death by 1,000 cuts. We get such little questions all day long and we can't get our work done. This is meant to really streamline that. So that's just a few, but those are probably the ones that come to mind where I say, wow, even 3 years ago, we were spending so much more time on these areas.
Well, it's such a good point because you think about how even companies are just tapped with resources, right? There's only so many people you can hire to do so many things. And when you're having senior, junior, mid-level, anyone kind of constantly updating these spreadsheets or trying to preserve the sanctity of them, that's money spent, right? That's salary paid that could be better leveraged in solving the root problem.
Not to mention the error that comes.
And the human error is another story. I mean, I've made so many spreadsheets that say, do not touch master, right? Do not, please ask Janelle for a copy. All of those they still get updated. Susan, did you have anything you'd like to add to that question?
Yeah, I'd probably add 2 other examples. We are a global company, so we're in 20 plus countries, which makes some of the regulatory components of the way that we administer HR processes quite complex. And maybe aside from AI, just digitization in some of those countries has been a big game changer for us, where, at one point in time, we were actually having to like sign addendums and wet it signature. And that's courier costs, that's labor, that's time, that's all of these things that you really don't think about. And then, we kind of get ahead of the curve and we reach out to our market peers to say, what are you doing? Or what's your best practice? Or how are you administering this? So we're able to kind of scale some of those processes in countries outside of that particular scope of work, which has been huge for us. I'd say the other thing is, and I touched on this prior, is standing up an AI chatbot. So we get about 30,000 employee inquiries a year. We've been able to reduce that by 15% just using AI tools from a people team support level. So instead of sending or opening an HR ticket or a people team ticket, you can go and chat with the Gen AI bot. It brings you back and summarizes all of the information that you need. If you still can't get an answer, yes, of course, we're there. But trying to scale things in such a way that you, again, have that balance between the human touch, but then I don't have to go and search this portal or search the wiki or the internal knowledge base. I can just chat with the bot. The bot has a persona, a people team persona, we like to call it. And so you're having like a really pleasant exchange in terms of the support that you need.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'm going to shift us into a slightly different direction for our next topic. I think there were a lot of head nods earlier when we were talking about, hybrid remote work and how do we kind of foster and maintain employee engagement. So that is the question. In what ways can organizations maintain a positive employee engagement in hybrid or remote work? I can tell you, at least from, my personal experience, RadAI is a fully remote company. And to a certain extent, when you're fully remote, it sort of levels the playing field because everyone is, has the same access, the same hours of the day. There's no in-person time that some people are getting rather than others. But we've really leveraged a lot of, collaboration meetings. We do a weekly town hall with our two co-founders, which has a little bit of informational vibe to it, a little fun, a little humor, a little of that kind of employee morale feeling. And that's been something that's worked for us, I think, for the past several years. But I would love to turn it all over to you. How are you maintaining employee engagement in a hybrid or remote world?
I'm happy to chime in here. I think, again, we're a global org and we're a global team. And so we really make sure that we invest a lot of time on global collaboration. And sometimes that just means a coffee chat or, a scavenger hunt or an engagement activity. And we're pretty much a camera on kind of culture too. So we really try to infuse some of those best practices across the culture of our teams, but just kind of breaking down those silos and again, hopping on a call to get to know one another has been pretty meaningful for our teams. And I think, we have something called connection days where we get together quarterly, but even those 2 days, it just gives you such a sense of fulfillment and engagement around how you're interacting with your colleagues. And so we're really particular about the way we think about curating those experiences, and our employer brand team does a phenomenal job mapping them back to our company values. And so those are some of the things we're trying to lean in as we're about 30% remote as well. So it's top of mind for us.
Yeah, the extra time I think is highly valuable, and something that I've kind of taken on as a leader is, I think when a meeting finishes early, it's always our inclination to end it early and give everyone time back. But there's something kind of fun about that extra time, even at the beginning of a meeting or an end of a meeting, when you can actually talk about human things, or let's stay on and chat, or I'd love to hear about your weekend, or you went on a trip, tell me about it. I think we really have to encourage those water cooler conversations that may be missing when everyone is overprescribed with, Zoom call, meeting. And there's not really that kind of looser interaction. Priti or Anthony, do you have anything you would like to add to that question?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Susan mentioned values, and I think my answer here would say my advice is there's no right way to set up a cadence or the exact recipe to strike the best collaboration. But one thing I would say is spend time on your values and map everything back to that. Earlier, I mentioned our employer brand. That's an extension of our peak. We call our values peak: performance, entrepreneurship, authenticity, and kindness. Peak values. And the idea is everything kind of finds its way back there. What that does is I think it helps both, tenured employees and new employees just immediately get it. They see how it all comes back. I often hear employees say, wow, for the first time ever, I'm part of a company that actually lives these out in everything we do. So we have so many examples, but I'd say a few are every monthly town hall, we do peak awards, and that's all employee-led nominations. And we,
Oh, that's wonderful.
Really big way, celebrate people. Yeah. And then another way is employee-led ERGs. So before COVID, someone on my team can keep me honest on this, I believe we had 2 employee resource groups. We now have 11. And that is just testament to the fact that our employees really want means to connect. And just today we had a DEI town hall where we kind of celebrated all the activity of all of those ERGs, and actually had a fireside chat about how do we think about DEI in our product, which was really kind of a neat discussion. And so again, no exact recipe to win, but always come back to those values. And if you don't feel like you have values that stand that resilience, then maybe it's worth looking at those and reinventing there before you start to create the architecture on top of that.
Great. I'm going to ask us one last question before we look and see if there are any questions from the audience. So my last question is, what emerging technologies do you all foresee having the biggest impact on HR in 2025 and beyond?
I can jump into that. It's all I've been thinking about and talking about these days. So you can't go. You have to say AI at least once a day for the AI gods to bless you. So of course, I think AI, and then the extension of that, and that's going to have so much impact on HR, on recruiting. I know Priti talked about it, and Susan talked about, in recruiting and employee experience and data and all these sort of things. Without a doubt, I mean, I think AI is going to have a huge impact on recruiting. We're already seeing it. I actually advise a company called Sprouts.ai, and there's autonomous recruiters that are going out and reaching out to folks based on the job description. To me, the really interesting thing that I see that's going to change. So right now, if you're an employee and you go into, and you can name whatever HR system you like, whether you like it or not, and you're going to go, and they're going to want to take a PTO day. And in some cases, the mobile app is a lot easier. But if they're on desktop, they have to go through like 30 different menus to find a way to just submit for a PTO, which is just, especially when you think of Gen Z, like frustrating by any means. And often it's in some sort of menu that's hidden by an engineer because they thought it would be a good place. So I think the idea of a chat experience that overlays across everything that you do within a company is going to be really mind-blowing. I think that's the future of interfaces. And so you're going to go into your HR system and say, hey, I want to take a PTO next Friday, and it's already going to put it in the system. It's going to send a workflow to your manager. I want to refer somebody. Referrals are a pain in the butt, and I want to refer my friend Anthony, and here's his LinkedIn to this job, and it's just going to do that stuff. And then on the back end, there are going to be all these autonomous agents that just do stuff. So we're going to start really transcending HR from what it's always wanted to get out of, which is the transitional and transactional work, to strategic work. It's a promise that we've been, digital has promised to us for so many years, yet we're all still filling, Susan talked about actually inking something in another country. Like that was even in the US, you still had to ink stuff until everyone agreed e-signature was okay. So I'm really excited and optimistic about this concept of a chat experience over all the employee experiences, particularly around HR and recruiting solutions. I think that's going to happen in the next 6 to 9 months.
Can I
Priti,
go?
Susan?
I,
Yeah, right.
I was going to say 1,000% agree on that. And maybe two things we haven't talked about yet. We have been talking a lot about using AI in learning and development. So there's two areas that we're like super excited about. Imagine a world where a salesperson is actually getting trained by AI to do their first pitch, to court common, objections from customers, and they're actually graded based on that. So we're super pumped about that. In a similar use case, we care a ton about our hiring quality, of course. And I think we all know the days when an interviewer just gets added to the panel. They've never interviewed maybe before. They don't know what they're really asking the person. They look up their LinkedIn profile maybe 2 minutes before they talk to them. Even though it's one of our most important things, that's what happens a lot of times. So using AI to actually train someone to be a better interviewer. So super pumped about those two areas. The other one we haven't talked about is all the data we have at our fingertips and using that for more action. So a couple things we've created here is just our own formulas of how to think about folks that might be really rising stars, star performers, peak performers, we call them, or even talent risks. Through all of the data inputs we have, we do, our version of stay interviews, we have engagement data, which of course is all anonymous, but then we also have performance data. So we can kind of couple all of this to start to paint a picture of what the employee experience looks like through data. And I think that AI is going to really power that in a huge way. Like imagine there's an algorithm that actually starts serving up, hey, this person might be at risk. You might want to engage in a different way. And there's data informed intervention to enhance someone's experience at G2 or any employer. So I think those are a couple areas that I'm super excited about.
Great. Susan, did you want to round us up?
Data was the big one for me. I think data visualization is just so huge, and the way that it even connects back to our hiring decisions, our workforce planning decisions at the most strategic levels, the way we think about how to slice and dice that data, the data that we provide to our managers making those decisions is just so key. And I think, sure, we have amazing opportunity to tie into AI into that data piece, but then making sure our workforce understands how to leverage and use that data to drive decisions is going to be big.
Amazing. So I'm going to start sharing the screen again because we're getting close to wrapping up. But I always have one question that I always love to ask other HR leaders for those who may be listening. So I would like to ask each of you in closing, what is a lesson or a phrase or a mantra that you have taken with you in your career that has shaped how you be and act as an amazing HR leader?
I can go first.
Great.
I'll credit this one to a person named Byron Katie, who many of you may know. She interesting life story, but she's really developed this idea of inquiring thoughts. And the core question is, how could the opposite of my story be as true, if not truer, to what I believe right now? And what it's really helped do is almost like kind of yoga for the mind, right? Like stretching your mind to think about the other side, maybe the other side of a difficult employee situation. And, we have our point of view and our conclusion, but maybe there's another way to think about it. Maybe somebody's actions really bothered you and there's a way to actually see the opposite of it. Is it possible that they didn't mean it the way you took it? And both in my own leadership, but coaching other leaders, this has been a transformational question.
Amazing. Thanks. Susan or Anthony?
I love that. And in fact, you can actually use ChatGPT's voice to play that other person or that other persona. So you can actually be like, yeah, what's this point of view?
You've appeased the AI gods another day, Anthony.
Absolutely. Yes. Once they take over. And I also put in the chat, I love the learning and development one because I use the voice chat, and there was a great example of, as a salesperson, like a person that doesn't like salespeople, act like that person and give me feedback. It's just really amazing. I highly recommend voice chat on ChatGPT if you have it, and play even from an HR perspective, because it goes into my, this is not necessarily a mantra, but my executive coach was a former CEO, because we need to continue to talk the language of business. And oftentimes in HR, we don't. We talk the language of HR. And so my question, or my thing when I have an idea or a program, is, what is the business impact? How do we tie this to the business? And sometimes it's not always linear and it's not easy, but it's a thing we have to. And so, what she had talked to me about as my coach was like, CEO doesn't care. The CEO doesn't really care about retention, but the fact that retention enhances the business or enhances productivity, that's the end game. And the board doesn't care. And again, this is general. Some boards, of course, do care, but the idea is like, what is the business impact? Talk in the business language, and you're going to be a more effective HR person. And that one I absolutely love.
Love that. Susan?
Mine was kind of similar to Anthony, and it was really making sure that you were aligning with the business objectives and making sure that HR is really acting in that strategic business partner relationship, right? But I'll give you another one that my mentors have kind of always embedded with me over the years, and that's really people first always. And we're able to be those strategic business partners, but still lead with empathy and still recognize that diversity is our strength and make all the right core business decisions that support our organization's key objectives. And we can still do that with putting our people first.
Amazing. All right. And while I'm pulling up the last slide, I will share mine. So mine comes from a parenting book. I have a 6 and a 9-year-old. And my husband used to tell me, don't ask our kids questions you're not prepared for the answers for. So for example, would you like to eat your vegetables? Do you want to brush your teeth? And I've taken that approach as a leader. Shouldn't ask questions of people that you're not really prepared for the answers for. And I think that's especially important in HR, right? Where we can often ask people how they feel, but if we're not really prepared to do anything about it, I think it just creates more pain. So thank you guys all for those amazing answers and the really thoughtful discussion. You guys shared some awesome strategies. We had some wonderful comments from the chat that we've incorporated. So just thank you again so much. If you're here live with us today and you pre-registered, I wanted to share what our upcoming episodes will be. The next 3 sessions that we have in December, January, and February respectively are enhancing engagement, strategies for better digital experience, leading through change, which I'm sure everyone has done and will do 100 times again before the end of 2025, how to build a resilient culture, and skills-based organizations, transforming talent and management. So if you have colleagues or peers who would find this series valuable, please share this with them. I'll also drop the invite again in the chat one more time. But with that, just wanted to say thank you for everyone for joining us. It was a great session. Really appreciated the engagement. Here is the link one more time. And I think we can conclude. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Digital Universe. Thank you, GoLinks. Feel free to check out more about them and their amazing products, but really great session, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.